And she said, can I look at you one last time? So now I'd taken the step back and she's one step in front of me. And she turned around, almost all the way around, and she looked at me, and I realized that everything in the beginning, when the color went out of the plants, the color had gone from everything. But as Katie turned around and looked at me, the color was back. I could see her eyes. She had the most incredible blue eyes. And she still had a head of hair, brown hair, and I could see her complexion was beautiful again. And she just looked so freaking healthy. She was back to being a healthy Katie.
Today we're talking to Annie Steward, who's had multiple spiritually transformative experiences, including an NDE and an SDE, a shared death experience with her sister, Kate. Thank you for meeting with me, really. Thank you. So I was intrigued by your near-death experience story, your shared death experience story with your sister. And I was hoping maybe before we get into some questions that you would share.
The 3 incidences I had around the 5-week period was something totally that totally woke me up to seeing that this had been happening for a good while already. But the main 3 that I want to talk about today is a little bit of a backstory. My sister Katie and I, we were very close. She was only a year older than me. She had been diagnosed with cancer 10 years before and had been given 3 years, but we got her through 10 years of natural treatments, which was really amazing. But right at the end, she was sent home to me on hospice. And so she had her, as in most hospice situations, her bed in the living room. And I was sole caregiver for her. We didn't have family close by. And excuse me, Katie wasn't really open to a lot of friends being there. So I became the main and only caregiver. So, but with Katie came her 2 cats and a dog. And I had 2 cats. So there was pretty much a zoo at home here. And the cats had been together before. And so we didn't anticipate any problem. But a week after she arrived, the cats got into a major fight. And somehow I was trying to separate them. I was bitten or scratched, I still don't know, on my hand. So I washed it off. And then I thought, well, I've got antibiotics. I'll get ahead of the game because I cannot afford to have something go wrong so that I am not here for Katie. So I went and I took some antibiotics that I had without checking. And within minutes, I went into anaphylaxis. I stopped being able to hear, stopped being able to see straight. I was really, really sick. And Kate at that point was still pretty good. She was okay. She was in bed, but she was alert and awake and everything. And she saw something going wrong, so she called her friend, who was an ICU nurse, to come down. And she skidded in the door, took one look at me in the bucket, and said, "You got to go to hospital now." So I was taken to the hospital. I don't remember much about that other than feeling I'm not okay. And I went into the little room they put you in. And I remember the nurse saying to me, they're going to intubate me because they had all the machines hooked up and everything by then. And she said, "This is bad. We're going to have to intubate you." And I said, "No, I'd like to see if the medication works first." And then I was out. And during that time that I was out, I don't know how long I was in the hospital bed for, that I was either asleep or I don't know how to explain it. But I found myself in my living room again. I was floating up at ceiling height, but there wasn't a ceiling, there wasn't a room. It was just at that kind of height. And I was looking down on Katie in her bed, and she was asleep or resting, and our friend Aranel was sitting on the couch. But she was sitting in a different place from where she normally sits on the couch. She normally sits right up close to where Katie's bed was when she had come the previous, the time Kate had been here. And there was this question that floated. It wasn't a question that I now in my meanness would have asked, but It came from inside me. The question was, what happens if I die now? What will happen to Katie? And the answer, I've thought a lot about it, came from outside everything. And it's okay. She'll be okay. Everything will be okay. And I wasn't surprised in that moment. I wasn't surprised at the answer or me asking the question. It was just something that was happening. Well, with that answer, Katie in the bed disappeared, and all the animals, all the cats and the dog were sitting in a straight line, and they were all looking up at me. And again, there was no room. It was like a grayness. It was like a grayness, like a wet beach sand grayness type thing. It wasn't threatening or anything. And the same question came from inside me. What'll happen to the animals? Because we really needed them to stay together. And will they be okay? And the answer came back again. It's okay. They'll be okay. Everything will be okay. And the animals faded out. And then the faces of my my three kids, my adult kids, were standing, and I could see them, and it wasn't that they were looking up at me, but their faces, it was like they were positioned to look at me. And as that question was forming in me, I realized that I'm not ready to leave them. So the question was moot, and it stopped. So there was no answer to that, and immediately that part of the experience was over. I don't know how long it was later, a couple of hours or so. They woke me up in the hospital and they said, okay, you're okay. The machines were beeping less than they were when I went to sleep, and I could get dressed and go home. So I did, and I walked out the door, but because I didn't remember how I got into the hospital and being very unfamiliar with the hospital, I didn't know how to get out. So as I went out the door, there was a male nurse standing, and I remember there being silence, just this, not a scary silence, just no sound. And I remember him looking at me kind of weird, and then he pointed to the exit sign. And I walked down that corridor being very aware that I didn't want to touch anything. I didn't want to go near a wall. I didn't want to touch anything. I found my way outside, and as I got outside, you've got that part at an emergency entrance where the road's kind of wide, and the road's wider, and I could see cars and I could see people, and I knew that there was noise, but I couldn't hear any of it. And the thought was that I didn't know at that point whether I was alive or dead. I was questioning whether I was alive or dead because I didn't even, when you walk, you're aware of your feet. I wasn't aware of that. So I walked across there was a wide area, and there was a sidewalk with a brick wall building next to that. So I walked across there, and I thought, okay, if I'm dead, I'm going to have to see if I'm dead or alive. I'll touch the wall, and if my hand goes through the wall, then I'm dead. But at that moment, the thought was, well, how am I going to feel about being dead? So anyway, I got to the wall, and I touched the wall very gingerly the first couple of times and saw my hand didn't go through it. So I figured, okay, I am alive, but I'm still not sure why I don't feel here. I walked all the way down the wall, and I kind of touched it all the way down and got to the end of that where there was a road and a sign, the emergency hospital entrance sign, no doubt. And it was on two metal poles with a sign above it. And I thought, well, I'm going to lean up against the poles and just get myself together a little bit before I get somebody to come and pick me up. But I didn't want to lean against the pole because I still wasn't sure that I was solid, that I was here. So I remember touching the pole all the way down, making sure it was solid, and then thinking, well, if I'm dead and I fall through the pole, nobody's going to see me anyway because I'm a spirit, not a human. And I stood there for about 10 minutes and sort of pulled myself together, and then I called somebody to come and pick me up. And that was the end of that experience, but I didn't explore it. I didn't question it. All I needed to do was get back and be okay so that I could take care of Katie, because there was nobody else here to do that. So that was, and I don't know with that one whether I don't have any of the data that says I had died. I don't have any, all I have is the nurse at the end as well, when she said I could go home. She said to me, please throw the medication away, because next time you probably won't survive it. You came really, really close. So I don't have the data that says I actually died, but I actually asked our friend Aronel why she was sitting in a different place on the couch when I was gone, because that was unusual. She was further away from Katie. And she just looked at me and said, how did you know that? So to me, it was a confirmation that it wasn't just something made up in my mind. It was actually something that I had seen.
When you were floating towards the ceiling in the beginning, could you feel into a body of sorts, a being of sorts? What did you feel in terms of your presence?
I've not been asked that one. That's an interesting one, because I didn't feel like me. I didn't feel solid. I didn't feel. I don't think I was aware of. Well, I wasn't aware of being a body. It was more like being part of everything. It's more like just, I don't know, when something, you put a sugar cube in water and it dissolves, but there's still sugar in there. That's how it felt like. I knew I was separate from everything, but yet I wasn't a solid separate. To me, it just was. It didn't feel unusual. It didn't feel out of control. I felt with the last question and me being able to stop that last question, that obviously there was maybe some control, more than I realized. But I didn't feel that I was directing what was happening. It was just happening. And there was no distress. There wasn't on either side. There wasn't distress and there wasn't comfort. It just was. It wasn't wrong. It wasn't unusual even. It was just, this is what's happening, and here's the question, I'll wait for the answer. And then it addressed the three most important things in that moment. That is the latter. There were more thoughts that were, in thinking back on it, because I did not process even that, the NDE, or the next thing that happened, the shower experience, until after the shared death experience, a good couple of days. So there was a long time lag in, but it's very different from a dream, and it's very, it just happens. It just is. But it's not a feeling of being out of control or in control. It's just being part of the big thing. It's just being, oh, it's so hard to put into words, because there just don't seem to be the words for. I wasn't uncomfortable. I wasn't uncomfortable with not knowing what was going to happen. It was in the shared death experience, I have more dual thoughts on that one, whereas this one was very short. But no, it's more real than a dream. It's more solid without being more solid. It's not solidity in like being able to have three-dimensional, but it's more real. It's just a totally different thing from a dream. I've had many dreams. I've had predictive dreams. I've had dreams of people who have passed, and those are different from the NDE.
Do you mind sharing your next experience?
All right, the next one, that experience was right before Christmas that year, it'll be 2 years coming up now. And somewhere in the next week or 10 days, the same friend who came and sat with Katie when I was in the hospital, she came in, because she would come in as she could. She's working, so she would come in as she could. And she took one look at me and she said, you need a break. You need to go and have a shower, get yourself relaxed, go and take a nap. And I said, okay, thanks. And because she's an ICU nurse, I knew she could take better care of Katie than I could. So I was totally relaxed in that moment. I was totally okay with leaving Kate. So That added to that was, by now I was totally exhausted, because it's emotional and it's physical work and it's very little sleep and it's my sister and all that. So I went to the other end of the house, closed the door, went to get, and I thought I'd have a nice hot shower and get an hour's nap in. And got into the shower, and the weirdest feeling was like, it was as if this, I don't know how to explain, but Katie came into me, full body, just came into me. And I heard in my head saying, ha ha, sis, look what I can do. And I'm like, what the heck? And of course, I jumped out the shower, and that was the end of my peaceful sort of rest or anything. And I just said to Aaron, I can't take a break right now. I'm too wired or whatever. And I came back in and looked after Katie. And I didn't tell her about that. And then it happened the second time, about maybe 5 days later. Same thing. Aaron came in, gave me a break, and I went into the shower. So I'm standing there and I'm not thinking about that, because I didn't process both the NDE or that first shower thing. I didn't have the brain space at that time. It was filled with needing to take care of Kate. So I'm standing in the shower this time, and again it happens. Now, all these experiences in the shower, Katie's in the living room. I don't know whether she's awake or asleep or just laying there, but she's alive in the living room. So the second time she comes in, and I thought, well, okay, Kate's hair was coarser than mine. I'll reach up and see if this is her, if I am now her, what's going on? So I reach up and touch my hair. I realize this is Katie's hair. And at that moment, I was also, being me and Kate, actually physically moving my hand, I was outside myself looking at us. So I could see me lifting my hand up as well as doing it. And I realized that, well, that is Kate. It is Kate's hair. And that stopped right then. And I thought, okay, that's just weird, but it stopped. So I let it go, finished the shower, and came back to do my thing. And then about a couple of days after that, I was the exhaustion doesn't get easier. You don't get more sleep. It just got. So I spoke to Aranelle about that. She was a lot more spiritual than I was. And I told her what was happening. And she said to me that if I wanted to, I could ask Katie not to do that, because I don't know how to deal with that together with everything else right now. So when it happened the third time, again in the shower, I felt her coming. And I said, Katie, please, I love you, but I can't deal with this as well as everything else. So please don't do this again now. And she never did. Now I wish she would, but she never did that again. And again, I didn't discuss it more with Aranelle. I didn't pay it much attention because a lot was going on. And I didn't even process it until after everything was done. So
that's amazing. It makes me wonder about water, if water is a catalyst there.
Yes.
You know?
Well, the reason we're living near the ocean is because Kate and I have always loved the ocean, because water has been peaceful. She did the most incredible sailing excursions all her life. She was a sailor, single-handed sailor on the water, in the water. And that's always been a theme in our lives. But also, I think on all three of those occasions, that soothing water, the calmingness, me giving up the power of having to, or giving up the control that I had to hold on myself, I was able to let it all go, and that water just added to it. So I do think there's something in that.
Mentioned you were at one point in one of the experiences outside looking back at yourself.
Yes.
Does that feel, when that happens, does that feel like you're just like you're looking at me right now through the computer?
Yes and no. In that experience, I could see the Kate and me with my hand up in my hair. I could see that as if I'm looking at you. But standing out, the part of me that was standing outside looking at that felt much less solid. That felt whimsy. That felt almost see-through. I didn't feel as solid, or as if I was as solid as Kate and I together were. So that was there were different perceptions of how solid it was. It
Yeah.
was like a shadow. Not that I was a shadow, but it was like a shadow part of me standing outside, but a light, not dark as a shadow's dark. I don't know. Kind of like
Yeah.
almost like if you're thinking about it now, it's like almost like you have with computer things you can do. It's like I was made up of water, or I was made up of water and air, standing outside, but I could see the solid part of me and Kate in front of me.
I ask these questions because I hear them a lot, or I see them a lot. When we're out of body like that, when you're looking at yourself, the solid part of you, you're looking back at yourself. Is that very real looking? Is it like you're immersed in that experience, like you're seeing yourself? There's no
Yeah.
cloud to it. There's no,
No, there's
it's,
no cloud. It's just there. It's like I'm looking, well, it's like if somebody was standing in my living room right now, like looking
yeah.
at you. There's no filters. Um, there's nothing. No, it's very, very real. It's very, very solid. It's
So you had another experience.
Yeah.
Do you mind
Now,
sharing that?
all of these things happened. Katie was home with me for 5 weeks. 1 week into it, I had that near-death experience, and I'm not sure if it was a week or 10 days after that was the shower experience. And then Katie passed on the 25th of January. So there wasn't a lot of time between these things, but she had, she was obviously on hospice and the nurses were coming in. And one time, maybe about two weeks before she passed away, she had become unresponsive for 2 days in the hospice, and everybody had said, she's going, she's leaving, it's time. So, and then she came out of it. And she came out of it for a good 3-4 days, which was quite amazing. And then again, it was closing down time. It was time she was going. And hospice had been in the afternoon, and Aranel had stayed with me the night before Katie died, because this is not something I had done before, and she knows how close Kate and I were, so she was concerned about me, so she stayed with me and wanted to keep an eye on Katie and me. So we'd finished taking care of Kate first thing in the morning, and about 7 o'clock, Aranel said she had to go home. She had to work shift that night as well, so she had to go home and feed her cats and get some sleep before she goes to work. And I remember her leaning over Katie's bed and kissing her on the forehead and saying, "See you on the other side, Katie." And I let Aranel out the door, locked the door behind me. It was still dark, 7 o'clock in the morning, January. And I came back in and looked at Kate, and she was on her back, and there was a tear running down her eye, and another one pooled in the other eye. And I thought, well, how can that be? Because she has been unresponsive for 2 days now. And how could she? There must be something going on inside her that she knows that that's the last time she's going to see Aranel. So I said to her, don't worry, Aranel will be back later. And I thought, I need to just come and sit on the couch and just be in the moment, because now I know she's going to die and I'm going to be the one with her. And I don't know how to do this. So I wanted to pull myself a bit together. And I came and sat on the couch. And Kate was again, there was no response from her. And as I sat down, I had this absolute knowing that I couldn't sit here. I had to get up and be right next to Katie. So I got up off the couch. And as I'm getting up off the couch, you know how when you're getting up, your face is pointed towards the floor. And right over the floor was this bright number, 842, in like those big alarm clocks with the little pieces that make up big red letters, 842. And I thought, okay, well, I don't know how to deal with that. I don't know what that is. All I know is I need to be next to Katie's bed. So I pulled up a chair and I lowered her railings on the bed. And I put my head on the pillow right next to her head. She was facing straight up. She was laying on her back. And I put my head next to her, and all of a sudden, and I had no plan for this. It was the only thing I knew is that I needed to be right with Kate. So everything that happened after that was, it just happened. It wasn't a thought, okay, I need to do this or I need to do that. So I put my head on the pillow next to her, and this South African lullaby that my dad would sing to us when we were in some kind of stress as small kids just came pouring out of my mouth. It was like, I don't know where it came from. I hadn't heard it, I hadn't thought of it in years, but I could almost see it like a scroll coming out of my mouth straight into her ear. And I was humming, singing this to her. And then I noticed that I was not aware of myself anymore below my chest area. And also with Katie, everything once again disappeared into that same gray look that I had with the NDE. So it was like, okay, that's back again. And I remember thinking, okay, there wasn't any distress in my house disappearing. Even the top of Katie's bed was gone. The animals, the cats had to be locked up separately since the fight. So I couldn't hear them yowling. I couldn't hear the dog snoring. Everything just disappeared. And then with seeing that everything had gone, I found that we were standing on a road. We didn't go to the road. We didn't travel. There was no sense of going anywhere. We were just on this road. And it was a narrowish road. I remember being a little bit convex. And there were plants and flowers along the side and out to, and Kate was standing to my right. And I remember looking, thinking, oh, but the flowers were not bright. They weren't like other people talk about beautiful, indescribable colors. They were muted, they were pastel color. And I looked at them, and as a photographer, I looked at them and thought, that would make a beautiful picture. And the color disappeared. I knew the color was still there, but I couldn't see the color anymore. The flowers and plants didn't become see-through. They didn't become white or anything. They just had color, but I knew I couldn't see them. And the thought at that moment came to mind is like, okay, because it's not about me and what I'm seeing, it's about Kate. So I said to Katie, and when I say I said to her, it wasn't like me talking to you. It was I didn't know the words then, but now I can use them. It was a telepathic communication. And I just said to, because I could feel her angst, I could feel her stress. She was not able to stand or walk without pain the last 6 months of her life, 8 months of her life. So she was standing next to me, kind of stressed. And I said to her, no, don't worry, Katie, you can stand and you can walk without any pain anymore. And she jumped around, tested her feet, and I could feel her feeling better. And so I said to her, okay, what we have to do is we have to walk down this road. There's a gate at the end of the road. That's where we have to go. And with that, saying that to her, my other side of my brain said, how did I know that? How did I know that there's a gate? And how did I know that I should say that? But it was just a query. It didn't require an answer. It was just a notation of, I'm not sure how I knew that. So Katie, the last 6 months of her life, she was always saying, give me a minute. If she had to move, or if I had to move her, or if something came up, whether it was physical or emotional or just, with life, she'd say, give me a minute. And she'd have to adjust to whatever was going on. So she said, okay, give me a minute. And I would always just say, just take all the time you need. Whenever you're ready, we can go on. So after a little bit, she said, okay, let's go. So we started moving, and I say moving because it wasn't walking. It wasn't that motion of walking. It wasn't floating. It was just that 1 minute, one time we were here, and then we moved across the road. And I remember that we were communicating, but that part of the communication was not, I don't remember. All I remember being gentle and not specific at all about anything I can think what we were talking about. And about halfway down this road, and again, I queried, how did I know it's about halfway? But about halfway down this road, Katie stopped. And up until that point, every little bit, she would say, give me a minute, and we'd stop and just wait for her to get ready. But we got to this midpoint, and I realized that she had planted herself. She was not wanting to go any further. And she said to me, I would rather stay here with you, Annie. And I said to her, I would rather you be able to stay here with me, but you can't. We can't go back. We can't go sideways. We have to go forward. And in that moment, I had, or I took, but the time was there to tell her again how important she had been in my life, how much of a directional person and how close and how amazing she had been for me and to me, and how thankful I was for everything. And again, it was like a package. It was data going through telepathy. I wasn't talking. And her response was, okay, after a minute, she said, okay, we can go on then. And we walked a little bit further, or we moved a little bit further on, because I could now, from that point on, I could see the gate in the distance. And so as we got closer, I could see what I perceived was figures, people standing behind the gate. And we moved a little bit further, and at one point I said, look, you can look through the gate. The gate had square pillars. The pillars were square, and then it was like a slight rise in the middle and then down, and it had bars down that you could see through. So I started saying to her, look, you can see there's mom and there's dad and there's our aunt, and she froze again, and she's like, she just stopped, and I said, okay, because in that moment I realized what she was afraid of, because all the way along I could feel how she was feeling. I knew whether she was stressed or okay. It's when somebody becomes unstressed, I could actually feel that dropping of the shoulders in her. So she stopped solid again, and without her having to say anything, I knew that what she needed was to go. She didn't need or didn't want to be taken or fetched. She didn't want people to come and get her. She needed to go. She's always been a very independent, strong woman. And she was afraid that somebody was, or they were going to come and get her. So I said to her, no, nobody's coming to get you. You have to go to them. They won't touch you. They won't interact with you until you do that with them. And again, I felt her calm and her peace. And she said, give me a minute. And we walked a little bit further. And my guess or my understanding of it was that we were about 6 to 8 feet away from this gate. And we stopped. And I said to her, okay, to open the gate, what you need to do is lift up your hand like you do in a classroom, and the gate will open. But before you do that, I have to take one step backwards. So we're standing right next to each other. So I said to her, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just taking one step back. And again, in that moment, I questioned, it wasn't a questioning. It was, how did I know that? How did I know how to open the gate and to tell her that? And how did I know that I absolutely knew I had to take one step back from her? But again, that didn't require an answer right then. And she stood and she said, can I look at you one last time? So now I'd taken the step back and she's one step in front of me. And she turned around, almost all the way around, and she looked at me, and I realized that everything in the beginning, when the color went out of the plants, the color had gone from everything. But as Katie turned around and looked at me, the color was back. I could see her eyes. She had the most incredible blue eyes, and she still had a head of hair, brown hair, and I could see her complexion was beautiful again, and she just looked so freaking healthy. She was back to being a healthy Katie. She didn't look at me very long at all. And she turned around and she looked at the gate. And I realized in that moment, I wish she'd looked at me longer, but I'm happy that she didn't, because her attention is where she's going. It's to where she needs to go. So a split second of oh, I wish you could looked at me longer, but the joy of her looking to walk forward was greater than that. And she stood there, and she lifted her hand up, and the gate opened. But the gate slid not past the gatepost, it went into the gatepost. So there was no gate that beyond the gatepost. And I could see my mom, and I could see my dad and aunts and family members and friends, and a friend of Kate's husband had died recently, and he was there. And right on the right-hand side was my nephew, and he had died by suicide approximately 2 years before that. And everybody was standing with their hands down next to their sides, and I could tell that they had different clothing on, kind of like I think you call it that minimalist painting. Somebody takes a brush and it's one stroke and it's a dress and a head or whatever. And I couldn't see their features, but I knew the features were there. So I could tell that none of them were looking at me, but yet I couldn't see their eyes. It's not something I knew that was my mom. I knew it was my dad. I knew it was whoever I knew was there, but I couldn't see their features, except Matthew. Matthew, my nephew, again, he was the one who had died by suicide. He was from the waist forward with his arms down, had this huge grin on his face, and I knew he was thinking. It was as if he was saying it. My Auntie Kate's coming, my Auntie Kate's coming. And he was so excited. And Kate stood there and she just looked at all of this. And we just stood looking at this for, I don't know how long it was. And then she said to me, can I wave at you one more time? And I said, of course, Katie, you can wave at me. And she had this wacky little, I don't know how she bent her wrist. And she waved at me with her left hand. And as that hand went down, she put her right hand out. And she was jaunty. She was excited. She was going on this, and she moved off towards them. She was, I can't say she was running because there were no legs involved, but she was going there with joy. And she reached out to them, and they all clustered around her and were greeting her. And it was one of the most beautiful things I've seen. And then I remember thinking, why is there a hair? But it wasn't a hair, it was a crack. I first thought it was a long hair laying on the ground because it wasn't straight, it was wavy between the gateposts. And I looked at that, and then it was a crack that widened. And the gateposts and everybody, now Katie as well, she didn't turn around again at all and look at me. And I remember thinking, that's good. It's really good because she's where she needs to be. So along this wavy crack line, the gateposts and everything just drifted away, just slowly into a mist. And I felt that it was very light blue, but again, that at that point, the color had disappeared again. After I had looked at Kate, the color all went away again. And that drifted off. And then I felt as if there was a side to this road, like a parking spot that had been carved out. And I found myself to the left of where the gate had been, and the road that we'd been walking on had gently disappeared. It wasn't a jagged end. It was just like it had slowly melted away. And I could still see all of them just floating, getting smaller, going away. And I was in this place on the left of the road, and I saw this cloud or mist. It wasn't encompassing everything. It was like a puddle of cloud, and it was coming slowly towards me, and then it engulfed me. And I remember thinking, I remember knowing I was being held upright, and I remember thinking, this is what it feels like inside a silkworm cocoon. It's gentle. It was neither warm nor cold. It was just absolutely comfortable. And I remember feeling that I felt like I was being put back together again, kind of like a puzzle that had pieces missing or moved away. I felt like I was being made whole again. I wasn't being made different. I was just being, I don't know if somebody would say it's a healing, but it felt like I was being healed, as if I was being shown you will cope, you're going to be okay. And I don't know how long I was in that for. And then I felt a pop sensation, kind of like if you put your hand through a piece of paper, and I didn't hear it. I just felt that sensation of popping through something. And I was leaning again. I was back in my house. My house was back together. I could hear the cats again. I could see everything. I was still leaning over Kate's bed, right with my head still on the pillow right next to her face. And I lifted up my eyes, and there's a clock on the wall. And the second hand clicked to 8:42. And I looked down at Katie. I lifted my head a little bit, and I looked at her, and her last breath went in my face. And even in that moment, I tied that time, 8:42, to the numbers I'd seen when I got up off the couch. So I stayed like that for a little bit, because I'm thinking, okay, I've just had the most real, incredible experience that I don't know how to process. And here's the closest person to me in my life who's just died. So I had these two realities that were right there. And I realized that it had taken, because Aronel had left around about 7 in the morning, and now it was 8:42. It was light outside, sun was shining. So I just didn't process it for a good couple of days.
As you were talking about the popping sensation, I hear that a lot, whether NDEers or shared death experience are coming out of the body or returning to the body. There's a popping
Yes,
noise and sensations.
sensation. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that was, that was after I processed a lot of it, months later, I realized that I'd felt that feeling once before, but it was different. So yeah, but it took me a long time to even start to be able to know how to process that. I mean, I didn't even know what it was called. I didn't know something like that was possible. And then only when I started sitting down quietly, and the rush of the days after somebody's passed away have gone, being able to say, okay, to tie the three things together, the NDE and the shower experience, maybe those are what were there first to prepare me for something like this. I don't know.
Absolutely. I think when we look back on our life or experiences, it is set up, I believe, like that to help us integrate and to know maybe what happened in that experience, or to help you go through it. When Kate turned back, was it just her that was colorful, or was it everything now?
No, it was just her.
Yeah.
And as you asked that question, I'm thinking, okay, was it everything? I don't know whether everything else came back, because my sole focus was on her.
Yeah.
I didn't even think to notice, or I wasn't noticing what was around. She had turned to look at me, and I was seeing her. So everything else, the color could have been back, but I did not notice that. All I know is that the color was there when she turned and looked, and when she turned around again and moved off, the color was no longer in her anymore. I don't know, because my feeling was when the colors first disappeared, and because she had, when the colors first disappeared in the beginning, they'd left, and then I told her that it's okay, she can stand and walk without pain. That was a really good moment. That was a really confident moment in her. She felt good, like, wow, I can do this. But yet the colors didn't come back then. So there might have been, but my processing of it is that had the colors come back, the colors were only given to me when I needed them. This wasn't something that was for me. This was totally, as I remember in the beginning, this experience was for Kate. It was not, the color was not for me, so it left. The people on the other side, I mean, people I've lost, family members, none of them looked at me. And that made me happy because this was all about Kate. Had they been color, I would have been distracted. Oh, I left out such a big part. When Katie left and went to the people on the other side, as she was being greeted by them, and before I moved off to the side, there was this voice that just said, "That was a job well done." And that's another thing, is that I wasn't surprised at the voice. I wasn't, I wasn't scared. It's like if I'm sitting here and somebody suddenly talks in my house, I would be a little bit worried. There was nothing like that. It was just this voice, again, the same kind of voice that I had in the NDE. It was just a voice that was there, and I was totally comfortable in the experience, not feeling watched, not feeling that anybody was going to say anything, but yet not surprised when a voice did come through. So I think the whole experience was for Kate. It was a job well done, as the whoever said, or whatever, but it wasn't for me. So the color would have been for me. And that's why I got color in Kate, but nothing else. Yes, the one biggest after effect is that I realized that I have had years and years and years of weird stuff happening that I just dismissed, like I did with the shower experience, like I did with the NDE. It happened, life has to go on. I've got other stuff to concentrate on. Acknowledging those, whether they've been, I had another shared death experience before that with an ex-husband that was very much shorter and was in public, and I kind of got frustrated and I yelled, "Stop it." And because all these memories were coming in for no reason at all. And 3 months later, I found out he actually died on that day at that time. So acknowledging those things have made me more aware of things I didn't think were possible before. So now when I recognize that I'm more sensitive and that I feel other people's emotions, and there's a lot going on actually, but I know it's not new. I recognize that it's something that's always been, but I've ignored it. So there's so much that has happened after Katie died that it's really just every time something happens, it's like, yes, this is something that we can all do, that we all have these experiences. But now I think those three things happening in such short and loud, as in I could not ignore them fashion, has actually just made me realize that yes, there are things that we can all do, and there are things that I am much more aware of instead of just dismissing them. Or just, I think we all have, when you're doing whatever, something, and a little thought comes in your mind and says, no, rather just pick up the spoon, or don't put the bowl so close to the edge of and you ignore that, and the next thing the bowl will fall. I'm listening to those things. That's a small example. There are much bigger things that are happening, but I'm paying attention to them and working with them rather than ignoring them. And it's like with some people, like I feel what they're feeling, and I feel their distress, even though they've got this happy face on, or they've got whatever. And so I can adjust my reaction to their situation. And again, I've always had that. I'm just more aware, and I'm accepting of that. I think, okay, because there's been in years past, for example, there was I had a dream of a friend's husband one day, and I knew in the dream we were in London, and he was walking in front of me, and he just turned around. He had this top hat on with this long black coat. It must have been winter in England. I've never been there. And he just turned around to me and he said, "Annie, please tell Pat I'm okay." And I haven't been in contact with Pat and Bill for years because they were in different countries, and we've been friends back in South Africa. And I found Pat's number again because it was that urgent. It was one of the times I did respond or react to that. And I tracked her down in Zimbabwe, and I called her and I said, Pat, I don't know what this means, but I know I have to tell you that Bill said, and I had this dream, and he said to tell you he's okay. And there was silence on the phone. And after a minute, she said, Annie, Bill passed away a couple of months ago. So those are the sort of things that are happening again, but that I'm listening to more.
Yeah.
And I'm super aware that Katie is still around. The one night I woke up, and I actually woke up and I was turning around in bed already. I didn't wake up and then turn. I was turning because I knew she was standing next to my bed on the other side. And I turned, and she was standing there as solid as I am, as solid as you are. She was standing next to my bed. I knew she wasn't on the ground because she was higher. It wasn't that she was taller. She was just, I knew she wasn't standing with her feet on the ground. And she had this ball cap on, and she just looked down at me and she says, Hi, Annie. And that was done. So there's so much of that happening that it's kind of sometimes hard to adjust into a world that doesn't know that, or who doesn't feel that, because things that seemed important before are not important. As in the NDE, that answer kept on coming back. It's okay. It's all going to be okay. And
Yeah.
so I'm living that, whereas other people are still dealing with other things that I find I can smooth out easier. I don't worry about things too much anymore. They are very different. I judge them by would I have. Okay, I can give you an example as an experience. Shortly after Katie passed away, I was in one of those days where I was furious with her. So I'm stomping around my house and I'm stomping up the corridor and I'm literally yelling loudly at her. Thank goodness my neighbors aren't too close, but I was yelling at her loudly, saying, This is not fair, it's not right. She shouldn't have left me. How could you leave me here? We were supposed to grow old together and we had plans, and how could you do this? And I was stomping up the corridor to the other side of the house, and I literally heard her right behind me. And she said, No, Annie, remember last time you left first. Now it's your time to stay longer. So I'm thinking, number one, was this whole thing of her dying just a dream? Because I can hear her voice solid behind me. So I spun around, and of course she's not there. And then I'm thinking, what the heck just happened? Now, was that my thought, or was that something that was more than that, or different? Was that an intuitive thought? Katie absolutely did not believe in reincarnation. She wouldn't talk about it. She was like, that's just too woo-woo. I'm not going there. That's impossible. I don't want to come back ever. I'm not interested. I don't want to talk about it. So for me to have had that experience with her telling me that, no, last time you left first, now it's your turn to stay, that's not something I would have thought at all. And then another one like that, I was on the way back. I was flying back home a couple of months after Katie had died. I'd gone to visit family. And on the aeroplane on the way back, I was having a rough time at being the first time coming home without Katie being there. And the pilot had said 20 minutes to landing. So, all that sort of stuff. And I thought, okay, normally I always look out the window. I'm just going to have to get myself together, and I'm just going to relax, lean back, and just breathe. And as I did that, there's Kate's voice, as clear as Kate's voice in my head. She's sit forward, lean forward, and look outside. I've got something for you. I'm like, this is ridiculous. That's just me being stupid, okay? Because we would take pictures out the airplane windows when either of us traveled. So this is me being miserable, me being in me. So I leaned back again. I'm like, no, I'm not. That's stupid. I'm not going to do that. I need to relax. And again, she yelled, she says, Annie, sit forward, look out the window. I've got a gift for you. I've got something for you. And now I'm thinking, okay, this is really weird. What are you going to do? Put an alien on the wing? Are you going to show me a UFO? Are you going to be perched on the wing with your leg crossed, sort of thing? And I'm kind of half laughing, so much so that the couple next to me looked at me like, what's going on with her? I leaned forward and I looked out the window, and the airplane came in lower than normal because there was a problem that delayed us a couple of hours. And we flew in right over the beach and right over the town with the lights that were like gems. And I'm looking at this thinking, well, that's really pretty. You know, that's, I mean, I see that when I fly back, but that is really pretty. And in my head, I hear Kate saying, this is for you to explore and enjoy without my issues holding you back. I never, ever thought of Kate's issues holding me back. It was, we'd only been here for 4 years. We moved to the beach to be able to explore and enjoy this place. We had lots of plans of doing that, but I never felt that her issues held me back. That wasn't even a consideration. So here I'm sitting up, I don't know how many feet up in the air, hearing her telling me, this is yours to explore and enjoy without my issues. Had that last part been left off, I would have thought, that's my thought. With that last part put on, there's no ways I would have thought that. So that's that comes from somewhere other than me. And I'm a little cynical in that grief does a lot of things, and it makes you maybe think in ways you wouldn't have, and it makes you think thoughts you wouldn't have, but not about reincarnation when I knew Katie wouldn't. You know, it's not something she was going, it's not something she believed in at all, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
But Kate was a interesting girl in that she had her own experiences as well. Sailing solo, she actually experienced seeing my mother in the kitchen back in South Africa while Kate was in the middle of the ocean, and she actually could tell my mom what she was doing. And then also about 6 weeks before she passed away, we had a conversation, and she said to me very tearfully, she said, Annie, I feel very strongly there's 2 of us going to be going. And now in retrospect, I thought she meant then 2 of us dying, because I honestly didn't know how I could survive without her. I didn't know that I could. I didn't know how I would. So when she said, I think there's 2 of us going, I had to assure her that no, I might want to die at that point, but I didn't feel that I have an issue to die. Now in retrospect, 2 of us did go on that last journey. So she was right with that. So again, that's where all the years with all these things happening from when I was about 17, I have been more intuitive. I have known things and known how to, you know what I mean? You hear things or feel things, and then you know how to adjust to that. But I've never acknowledged it. And this is where I say, but these last 3 things and everything that's happened afterwards, I know that these things happen to everybody. It's just that most, like I did, I just didn't listen to it. I didn't acknowledge it. I didn't give it the power it has. The important things that I've learned about since having and still having some experiences is that the people we love, the people that are in our lives, are never really gone. They are there. We might not see them. We don't see them majority of the time, but they really, really are there. To sit down and actually think about the things that have happened in your life that you just blew off or didn't think about deeply, it's kind of important, because once you realize you have had these experiences, it opens you up to accepting the new ones you have. One of the bigger things from this experience was not just that I felt I needed to share, because as soon as I started processing it, after the shared death experience, I realized it wasn't for me. It felt like this huge box or bag had been put in my hands that I had to put down somewhere. And this, talking to you, is part of me putting it down, because it's not just for me. That was one part of the important part of the story for me, as well as the part that part of Matthew really gets me, because having passed from suicide, a lot of people, having lost somebody, have to deal with the stigma or the worry of whether they're really okay, or are they banished, or are they suffering, or what. Matthew was the healthiest I had seen him in forever. He was excited. He was there with the rest of them. it doesn't matter how that person left this world. There were people that I saw behind that gate, and when that gate opened, who were believers, who were non-believers, who were not really nice people and shouldn't, are pretty ashamed of what they did. And they were believers. They were people who, of all walks of life, and Matthew. And I think that's so important that we just know that they're still there. And they almost daily, Katie, I know Kate's here. It's not a big thing. I don't ask for it, but I know she's here. And I don't miss out on a darn thing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Annie, for coming today and speaking with me.
Well,
I
thank you
really
for letting me.
appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for letting me share again. It really, it really helps. And
Mhm.
if anybody's had experiences like this, I think we are either scared of sharing them because people will think you slightly off the beaten track or you need to be avoided. But in my experience, the most people I have shared it with have actually gained something or have shared their own experience that they hadn't spoken about before either. So I think it's important if you've had an experience like this to talk about it, to actually get it out there because that frees somebody else up from internalizing it and not understanding it.